Many AI chatbots actually use the generative AI technology. And while the technology brings a lot of benefits on multiple fronts, we are also concerned about the privacy and also ethical risks which it brings about. And we are in particular concerned about the excessive collection of data, for example, because it was reported that ChatGPT scraped about 300 billion words from the internet in order to build up the model. The other problem is about the black box problem, and essentially that is the non-transparent use of personal data. Because for this kind of AI model, we are concerned because the technology is so developed, the use of the data is not really clear or transparent to the users. And that is why we are concerned about the non-transparent use of data. And the third problem is about data security. For example, ChatGPT was reported to have data breach back in March this year. And in that data breach, it was reported that the titles of the conversation history of users, including their names, email addresses, and also part of their credit card numbers, were disclosed to members of the public. And the incident was widely reported back in March this year, raising doubts in the user's mind about the reliability. My office has issued a leaflet called the 10 tips for users of ChatGPT in order to provide some tips to users to protect themselves while they are using this new tool. Because the development and use of AI, I believe that everyone is aware of the benefit bring about all these developments nowadays. And on the other hand, we are also concerned about the privacy and ethical risks which the new technology brings to human beings. And we notice that in many jurisdictions around the world, they are considering measures to regulate the new technology, whether it is in the form of law or regulation or in the form of guidelines. And in mainland China, for example, we noticed that the mainland China has promulgated a temporary measure to regulate the management of the services by generative AI. And this actually makes mainland China the first jurisdiction in the world to directly regulate generative AI. And in other parts of the world, for example, in the EU, in Canada and UK, they are also discussing possible forms of legislation to regulate artificial intelligence. And I believe that all these legislation will come into place either in the later part of this year or next year. And other than laws and regulations, we also notice that many jurisdictions have promulgated guidelines to regulate the development and use of AI. Talking about Asia, for example, we noticed that in Japan, Singapore, and in Korea, guidelines were promulgated. And back in Hong Kong, although we don't have any legislation directly regulating AI, my office has promulgated a guidance on the ethical development and use of AI in 2021, about 2 years ago. And for my office guidance, we have promulgated 3 basic data stewardship values and also 7 principles, ethical principles, to regulate the development and use of AI. And all these values and principles, they all reflect international, well-recognized norms or principles. Because the use of social media is becoming prevalent nowadays, we have carried out a study last year and we looked at the privacy settings of 10 most commonly used social media platforms in Hong Kong. And from our study, we find that basically all these social media platforms, they collect huge amount of personal data, ranging from 12 to 19 pieces of personal data. And all of the social media platforms reveal, they collect users' location data, whether it is accurate location or whether it's just a coarse location. And I think an alarming aspect is that all these platforms also would transfer users' personal data to their affiliated companies. And that would include, for example, companies responsible for doing the marketing and promotion work. And I think these these findings are rather alarming to the users. And other than that, we also find that most of the platforms in question, they would keep users' credit card information. And on data security, most of the platforms do have end-to-end encryption for messages between users, and also they have introduced multi-factor authentication for users. And as regards advice to users, of course, the first piece of advice which we give to users is don't give so much personal data to all these social media platforms, and do check their privacy or security settings. If you don't need a particular security setting or privacy setting, you can turn it off. For example, there is a location tracking function. If you don't need that function, you can turn it off. And if you don't need the cross-platform tracking function, you can also turn it off. And the other piece of advice which I would give to users is to think about whether you need to disclose all your data which you post on these platforms to the whole world. If you don't need to disclose that to the whole world, you can also adjust the privacy setting so that all your postings are only disclosed to your friends or to a close group of people.